Welcome to Unraveled Mind. My name is Antonio, and I'm here with you today to talk to you about responsibility. Stay tuned, and let's play. This is the fifth in my Life Mastery series, and as always you can find the links to the full playlist in the description below. I've now done quite a few videos, and I've covered important topics. Of course they are not ordered due to importance, they are all important equally, but I've done very nice episodes on the relationship with yourself, on focus, authenticity and awareness, so feel free to check out and start thinking how these things all intertwine together, because even though I'm presenting them in separate videos, they all overlap and intertwine together to make, hopefully, a powerful and exciting life to live. And there's a lot that can be said about responsibility. This is a deep topic. There's a lot of ideas that I have. I don't know many of them, or how deep will I be able to go in this short video. But let's start at the beginning and let me try to explain what do I really mean by responsibility and why is it important. And I see responsibility, as I said, as a very deep topic. There's a lot of layers and there's lots of different perspectives we can analyze it. And this is what I will try to do. I will try to look at from different perspectives, and hopefully by then combining and trying to see what these different perspectives have to offer us, try to get a better understanding overall of what do I mean by responsibility. And the first perspective that I would like to offer you is that responsibility is ownership. And what do I mean by this? An example will make it clearer. Imagine that you have a car and there's some problem with your car. Maybe it needs to go to the garage and needs to be painted, needs to be checked for an inspection, and you feel responsible for making these things happen, so making these changes, for taking the car to the garage, to having the car checked. Maybe if the car needs some gas to operate, you feel responsible to take it to the gas station, fill it up with gas. And that's completely normal. Most people would agree with this. But why do you not do these exact same things with your neighbor's car? Imagine that the neighbor has the exact same car as you, in the exact same situation where it needs certain things to function properly as a car. It needs to be checked, it needs to have gas, but you are not feeling responsible to make these changes in the neighbor's car. You say, it's not my car, the neighbor's car is the neighbor's responsibility, my car is my car, so therefore it's my responsibility. So in order for you to feel responsible towards something, you have to feel a degree of ownership towards it. It's not the same thing, but they are intertwined, and that's what I wanted to get at with this perspective, is that responsibility comes from a sense of ownership. What I feel it's mine, then I feel responsible for taking care of it, caring for it. And just alluding at this is very, very important if you really want to apply, instead of applying this to the concept of a car, if you apply to your own life. If you feel you own your life and you feel responsible for your life, then you'll take good care of your life, and you'll keep making the changes necessary to make sure your life and yourself are operating at peak capacity like you do with your car. So it's really important to look at it from this lens and see how it can be applied then to ourselves in this case. Another perspective that I would like to offer you is responsibility as accountability. So what do I mean by this? So again, an example. We'll try to make this a little bit clearer. Imagine that you are at work and your boss, your manager comes by and says, I need this report done by the end of the day. It's your responsibility, and I will check up on you at the end of the day to see if it's done. So what just happened here? He said the boss just told you this is now your responsibility, you have to do it. To be honest, and this is an important distinction, is no one can make you feel responsible for anything. Only you can make that call. Only you can decide whether you're responsible for this thing here, if you are responsible for this thing there. No one can give you that sense of responsibility. People, and this is what happened in this case, they can make you accountable. They can force accountability on you. And this is what the manager was saying when he says, now you're responsible for this report. What he's saying is that I'm going to hold you accountable by the end of the day and see if indeed this is done or not. And a final way that I will also like to try to describe responsibility, or at least a perspective, is responsibility can also be seen as duty. If I have a duty towards something, I feel responsible towards it. And most parents would say they have a duty towards their kids to be the best parent that they can be and to really care and provide for the children. Most parents would agree with this. And what would they also say? I feel responsible for my kids' well-being. I feel responsible for making sure I can do as much as I can to make sure that they are well fed, they are taken care of, and everything is well in their lives. They feel this degree of responsibility that comes from this sense of duty. It's not so much that they feel they own the kids. Of course, there's a degree of ownership of the family unit, of the relationship, but most parents wouldn't say they own the kids, but they say they would have a duty towards the kids. Why is it important for us to really think about responsibility? I'm sure you might be thinking, this all sounds nice and good, what you're saying, but why should I care? And maybe it was already a little bit clear from a few of the things that I'm saying, but responsibility is essential in the process of change. So what do I mean by this? Most people have certain desires, or we can call it wishes, for things to be a certain way in their life. They want to lose some weight, change jobs. They have certain desires of how their life could be different. And even outside of their life, maybe they also have some desires about how society should be, how their country should be, how certain people should behave. Also, this current very big problem we are facing with climate change. A lot of people feel things should be different, and there is a lot of room for improvement, and there's something that needs to be done. But how many of the people that really think that there is a lot that needs to be done in their lives, outside in society or in climate change, how many of these people really feel responsible towards these things? And this is the key distinction, because you can want things to change, and you might want it really bad, but if you don't feel responsible, you are not the one that needs to make these things happen, then you will not take the actions to make any changes. Of course, they can still happen, but your influence, or whatever influence you have, will not be utilized. And of course, in something like the climate change, it's really hard to see you as a person having a big impact, but of course there's things that you can do. But the closer you bring, and of course this is my main focus, there's a distinction between individual and collective responsibility, and my main focus as a coach, and because I'm really interested in people, I tend to focus specifically on the individual responsibility. And it's also a better use of your resources, in the sense that when it comes to your own life and to your individual responsibility towards yourself, the more influence you have to actually make changes happen. You might not have a lot of influence to make direct change in global warming. Of course, there's things you can do, but you have a strong direct correlation with making changes in your own life, whether it is the amount of income we have, whether it is the relationships, the type of relationships you have around you, the type of family life you have, the type of health that you have in your life. There you have a lot of influence. And if you don't feel responsible, because how responsible do you feel for these different areas that I just said? How responsible do you feel for your health? How responsible do you feel for your wealth? how responsible do you feel for every relationship that you have in your life and for maintaining them and keeping them. And how true is that the areas that you feel the least responsible for are probably the areas where you see the least amount of change and you see the least things going on in this area. And that's why it's important for us to think about responsibility, because it's an essential element if we are going to use our own power and our own action to make changes happen in all around us, in our environment, and of course more directly in ourselves as well. So that's why I think it's essential. Why I really want us to spend some time talking about it, and why I believe this is completely non-negotiable. That you need to really feel responsible for not only yourself, but of course for the change that you want to see happen in the world. Because this is something that happens a lot. That in our culture, it's special. I never had direct experience with this in a work environment, but from talking with friends and talking with other people, I've come across this thing that happens in the corporate environment, where when things go wrong, then everyone just starts to avoid responsibility. And if there's a problem in a certain area and you try to then look, hey, so what happened? You try to determine what happened. It's not our problem, it was the other department that did this and we did our job. And then you go to the other department, they tell you, no, it was indeed something completely different. It was just the supplier that did something. And it can be a complete mess to try to really come across or get a clear picture of what happened, because no one is really taking responsibility. And this is a big problem that I see in the business environment, because just providing a silly example, if you have a company, if you work for a company, how would you imagine things would be different if you and all the people around you, all your colleagues, were completely invested and felt completely responsible for the success of your company? Imagine that here I'm in Germany, so we have Aldi, and imagine that the cashier, the person at the cashier, felt as responsible for the success as the company as the managers. And the managers felt as responsible for the success of the company as the CEO and the board of directors. Imagine that. Imagine that everyone involved in this company, Holly in this example, were completely invested and felt completely responsible for the success of the company. Imagine if the shareholders were invested in the success of the company and not just their return on their stock. Imagine that. What would be different if it was this way? And just as a final example, and I promise before I will continue going to different points, but going back to this idea of the climate change. I know this is a cause that I also think about, and of course I will also regard it with concern. But I see that it really invokes a lot of passion in a lot of people I come into contact, and they really feel a degree of helplessness towards this, because they feel powerless to change it, but they feel it's really something important. And what I ask them, and maybe if you relate with this and you see that it's also something that you regard as truly important, but you really don't know what you can do, ask yourself, if you were responsible for solving our climate crisis, what would you do differently if you felt responsible for solving it? Not if you were the president of the United States, not if you were the president of your country and you had more power. With the amount of resources you have now, if you were the person responsible for solving this crisis, what would you do differently? It's an open question. Of course, there's a lot that can come from this, but I think it provides a lot of insight. But I think this is also the right point where I want to make a very, very important distinction. There's a distinction between responsibility and blame, because they are not the same thing. A lot of people see these two terms as interchangeable. If I'm responsible, that's also why people avoid taking responsibility, because when I say, if you were responsible for solving the climate crisis, what would you do? And people then say, but it's not my fault. Why should I do something? And this is something that then everyone is very good at doing. The United States and Europe, they say, the problem is China and India because now they are developing and they are producing a lot of polluting in greenhouse gases, so it's their fault. They have to stop doing it. And then China and India say to the Western world, no, you just polluted the world until now, and now you're telling us that we can develop. And so finding blame is always natural, comes very naturally, and you see everyone doing it in society. But it's, especially in this example, if you follow with concern this climate crisis, you see it's very pointless. It doesn't matter if we blame a certain country. This is not something that will be fixed by saying now, if China was to stop all pollution, that would not solve the crisis by itself if the rest of the world continue getting worse. So I don't want to focus only on climate crisis, but my point is blame is something that comes natural, but it's really useless when it comes to coming up with solutions. If you want to find a solution for anything, if there's a problem, coming up with blame is just a scapegoat. It makes you feel good if you are not the person getting the blame, because it makes you feel good, because it really dispels this sense of responsibility. So then it's not my responsibility, they are to blame, so they will have to fix it. But then you come to, you attribute blame to someone or to something, and then that's it. Then either you give them the responsibility to fix it if you can't, or you just then remove the problem and then you say it's fixed. We also do this a lot with criminals. If there was a crime, we find the criminal, we lock up the criminal, then it's done. We are not going to try to find out what happened, why is there crime. We are just going to remove the criminal and he's the one to blame. There's crime because there's criminals. So if we lock up all the criminals in the world, then there will be no crime. We've been trying this for the last 100 years or more, and there's still crime. So until we stop looking at the criminals as the reason why there is crime, and we start looking at why the criminals exist in the first place, then we will be able to solve our problem with crime, which I'm not saying it's easy, I'm not saying it's possible, maybe it's part of the human nature, I don't know. But I'm just wanting to make this distinction. Blame finds superficial reasons, but it doesn't mean it's the things we should be focusing on. And that's another thing for the people that watched my video on focus. If you're spending focus and attention and time on blame, you're diverging your limited resource that it's focused on, focusing on the solution, on finding causes, on seeing things to improve. Because blame, it's a right and wrong. This is the person who is to blame, or it's not. It's very black and white. Whereas solutions to problems, they tend to be very gray. There's no clear. If there was clear solutions, everyone would agree and they would get done. Problem is there's no real black and white solutions to at least complex problems, which most problems that aren't solved right now and they are important to us, they are not black and white, easy to solve problems. Another way to look at responsibility and blame. Imagine that you are overweight and you made it a goal that you want to lose weight, and you enroll in a gym, you start a diet, you listen to advice of a personal trainer, and you train your ass off, you do a diet, maybe you lose a little bit of weight, but some reasons, whatever happens, then you gain it back, everything again. What tends to happen in these situations, which is completely normal, is then people start to having this idea that maybe it's just my genetics. Maybe it's my genetics that I put on weight easily because my genetics absorb food in a certain way and are more predisposed to getting fat. And then your mind, as soon as you come up with these ideas, then it will really go with it and say, but yeah, my parents, maybe they also were a little bit overweight. My grandparents, maybe. And I remember when I was a kid, I had a brother and we were eating the exact same foods in more or less the exact same quantities. And he was fit and I was fat. So it really must be my genetics. He was just lucky and I wasn't. I got the fat genes and he avoided the fat genes. And what happens in this situation? You are putting the blame on the genetics in this case, and what happens as you do so, you release the responsibility to make this change. You now say, it's not my responsibility because there's nothing that I can do. There's the genetics that influence this, and there's nothing that I can do. It's a different thing, but they are related in the sense that blame helps us release responsibility, which is something your mind does. It's not that your mind is evil and it's really trying to trick you here in a certain way. Your mind tends to resist responsibility for the simple reason that being responsible for something requires attention, requires focus, requires emotional work. Imagine that if you are overweight and you feel responsible for making that change, and if you see that's not working, it's emotionally draining. Oh God, I want to lose this weight, and I know it's my responsibility. No one can do it for me, but I still can't, and it hurts. It's emotionally taxing to have this realization. So your mind, because your mind's concern is for your survival and to trying to make you feel less pain, it will try to avoid this. So maybe it's not your fault, it's not your responsibility, maybe it's your genetics, so don't feel responsible for this. Don't feel this amount of pain. Your mind doesn't like pain, and that's why it then constructs these ideas that it's not your fault, which it isn't. For you to feel responsible, you don't have to feel like it's your fault. And maybe there's really some genetic influence here that causes you to be more predisposed and gain weight more easily. But you can accept this reality and still feel responsible for changing it. And that's what we admire in society, is people that have all the reason to quit, have all the reasons to give up, have everything against them. No one would blame them if they would just give up and not do anything, but they still felt responsible for making the change happen. These are the people that we find inspiring. These are the superheroes we see in TV. An example comes to mind because I was reading the Viktor Frankl Man's Search for Meaning. It's a very famous book, very common, a lot of people know it. But for those who don't, it's about an Austrian psychiatrist. He was also a Jew and lived during World War II, so you can imagine what happened. He was put in Auschwitz and other concentration camps for 3 years. And in this book, he tells the story from his perspective, both as a prisoner and as a psychologist observing what was going on with his fellow prisoners and also with the guards, and just analyzing the situation and recounting these experiences from this perspective. I found it completely fascinating because no one would say the prisoners were to blame for anything that was happening to them. But this was something that he distinguishes very clearly in the book. He says that a very strong factor whether a person would survive and the other prisoners that did not survive was the ones that did. They still felt a degree of responsibility. Even with their limited freedom, they felt a degree of responsibility towards doing the actions that they wanted, or they felt responsible for the actions that they took despite their limited responsibility. And more importantly, they felt responsibility for the emotions that they feel, even amongst this pain and suffering. And it must have been completely horrible being in this situation. And I'm sure I don't wish it upon myself or anyone. But when we read this experience, we can't do anything but really admire people that even in these horrendous situations, they can still feel responsible for their own lives and for not giving up, and responsible for really finding joy and meaning, which is the core concept of the book, is the man's search for meaning, and still find meaning despite all this adversity. So this is really why I think responsibility is very important, but it should be as much as possible decoupled from blame. Blame has no place if you really want the best for a situation. If you are at work and there's a problem, blame is not going to help come up with a solution. It's just going to distract from actually addressing the solution. In your own life, blame will prevent you from feeling responsible, and therefore will prevent you from using your actions and using your power to actually make changes in the direction that hopefully you want. And so be very careful with blame, decouple it, and let go as much as you can from blame in your life, and start instead looking at addressing this sense of responsibility. I'm responsible for whatever happened, no matter what happened in my past, no matter how traumatizing it might have been. I might have been completely blameless. It was not my fault, but it's still my responsibility to make some change happen. Just as a final note, and this is something that I wanted to save now for the end, because I think it captures really well this concept of difference between responsibility and blame, is some people, they see responsibility as a separation between two words, response and ability. And that's exactly a very empowering way to look at it. No matter what happens to you, and of course what happens to you is outside of your control sometimes, but you always have the ability to respond. That's always within your control. Whatever you do, it's your ability to choose the response that you have to those situations that happen in your life. And before I finish the video, I would like to just mention a few more things that I think are very important when we talk about responsibility. And it's also very important because I see this really deep vacuum in our modern society. We see more and more people having a sense that their life doesn't have meaning, that they lack a purpose, that they lack something that gives them joy in their life. And there's a lot of reasons for this, or there's a lot of theories why this is the case. But one counteract to this that I truly believe is using this concept of responsibility. And what do I mean by this? Is that when you feel responsible towards something, you feel a degree of engagement. You feel a degree of attachment towards these things. And we as a society, we are very good at avoiding responsibility. We don't want responsibility, which then creates us from this position of disengagement. A lot of people feel disengaged with their work, and this is especially prevalent in big companies. I don't have statistics, but this is something I believe. Just from the sense that we all have this picture of the startup where everyone is super engaged and they have this amazing idea, and there's a small team and they are all working perfectly together, and they are all bought in and into the vision, and they all feel really responsible for the success of this idea. But as the company scale up and now you have thousands or tens of thousands of employees, then this sense of responsibility, it gets diluted, and people just then a lot of people that work at big companies, they don't really feel responsible for the mission of the company, for the success of the company. This is something that, sounds nice on paper, but it's not real. The workers are not really they are not trained to feel responsible for these things. And what this means is that if you're not feeling responsible for your work, outside of you getting the work done just so you're not getting fired, if that's what you think, you just want to get your work done and that's all that you care about, there's a degree of disengagement. You're not really feeling like you own your work. You're just doing work, but you don't own what you do. You don't feel 100% accountable towards it. You don't feel a sense of duty to make this the best thing that happens. And then, therefore, people are disengaged with their work, and a lot of people feel, it's very common in my generation, the millennials, that they feel a lack of purpose and meaning in their work. And this is something that it's more and more important for my generation, and a lot of people seek, which is meaning in their work, because it's not so easy to find nowadays. Another way that we can look at this is that why do, especially families, when you become a parent, most parents would agree that they find the role of being a parent meaningful. They find the relationships and creating the family something meaningful in their life. And why then is this the case? Does that mean that I need to have kids in order to feel meaning in my life? Well, there's a way, but I would like to really address what's underneath. Instead of thinking of a strategy, I would like to find the commonality between different strategies that allow you to feel meaning. And the strategy is, as I addressed earlier, is when you're a parent, you feel responsible for your kids. You feel this sense of duty. You feel accountable towards making sure the kids have a good life, and you feel this sense of responsibility. And what then do I say comes from this sense of responsibility? It comes engagement, it comes attachment. And from this attachment, from this, I'm creating this in this case, I'm raising this child, I'm creating this family. This is deeply meaningful, and this is what fills people with purpose, is this sense of creation, this sense of responsibility towards something. This is where, well, at least from what I'm offering, this is where meaning and purpose comes from, is when you feel responsible towards making something happen. And this is why sometimes people in our society, we chase money, because this is what people, or at least what society kind of tells us it's important, and then we start chasing money. But there's no purpose. It's just I want money, and we are chasing the money. But we don't really feel responsible for anything. We don't feel responsible for, maybe we work at the bank, but we're just doing it because it's a well-paid job. We don't really feel responsible for the clients our bank serves. We don't feel responsible for the mission of the bank. And it's nice having the money, but we don't have this sense of responsibility towards anything, and therefore there's this void. And it's very common where people, even though they have on the outside a good life, they have this void because they don't have a cause or something that they are feeling deeply responsible for. And by being our responsibility is something that they want to make happen. It's something that they think needs to change, and they see themselves as personally responsible to make this change happen. Not if it's a collective issue like climate change, doesn't mean you are the only one that needs to do something for this to change, but they feel it as their responsibility to make positive change in this area. And my video just stopped because I was recording for too long, but I'm just catching up where I was. So I was just talking about activists and activism. They tend to be very passionate people. And why is that? Why can't I be as passionate towards my job as a climate change activist is towards climate change. Imagine what would be different if you felt this degree of passion. And why is that? Because the activists see that it's their responsibility to change the world when it comes to climate change. It's my responsibility to open the eyes of people. There was Greta, this Swedish teenager that went to the United Nations on a boat, and she felt a degree of responsibility towards sharing this message. And I'm sure there was a lot of hardships on this journey, but I don't know her and I never talked, but I would imagine that in this journey, even though it must have been very difficult, and of course I admire her for what she was able to do and come publicly like that, it must have been very meaningful for her to do what she did. Doesn't mean she is going to continue doing it, but we can learn that from activists in these cases. If you feel responsible towards something, and you feel and it doesn't have to be a very big thing. If you feel responsible towards yourself in your own life, you feel responsible for having better relationships, if you feel responsible towards coming up with bringing a new idea, project to life, and you really feel responsible for it, these will be sources of meaning for you. And this is what excites me, is because there's endless possibilities in your own life for you to feel responsible. You can feel responsible for your finances, for your health, for your relationships. There's endless possibilities. So when people ask me, so what's the meaning of life? What should I really strive for in my life? I don't know. But if you just pick something and you really feel responsible for making that change, and you start building excitement, and with excitement, now I can do it, and I feel responsible now to make this idea happen. This is how this YouTube channel started for me. Then now I start to have this degree of responsibility of now I want really I want to see this in the world, and that brings meaning then on this journey. And it's a endlessly renewable resource, your life. There's always opportunities for you to improve and see areas where you can feel more responsible towards making a change. So that's what I think I want to leave you with this video, and I will stop it here. Is that, just to summarize, this responsibility is a complex issue. But it's very important to first understand what responsibility is, but also what it isn't. Responsibility isn't blame. And if you are responsible for something, doesn't mean you are to blame for that situation. If you are overweight, I'm responsible for being overweight, doesn't mean I'm the one necessarily 100% to blame. Maybe there's a genetic component, maybe there's other things, but I'm the one responsible now to make the change that I want to see. And this is important, especially because nowadays we live in a very meaningless world. We really have this vacuum. And I talk with a lot of people about this. And responsibility is I'm not saying it's all there is to meaning, but it's a very important component. And this is what I wanted to leave you with, is think about, if you're really feeling like you're not engaged and you're not finding meaning in some areas of your life, ask, how can I take more responsibility in this area? If I'm not very engaged with my work and I think my work is meaningless, am I feeling responsible in my work? Am I feeling responsible for the mission of the company? How can I be more responsible towards anything that has to do with my work, in order for me to feel like it's more meaningful? Maybe I can feel like it's my, or at least part of my job as whatever I am. It's also my responsibility towards the client, towards whatever company he works in. I was working in the European Space Agency, so it's my responsibility to put this satellite on Mars. And just to finalize, really, sorry to always continue with one final story. this encapsulates the story very perfectly. And this is a story that I heard. I will look and I will put an article in the description with a little more details, but I heard this story and I really hope it's true. But it was when we were in the 50s, when they were in the peak of the space race, when there was this target to put a man on the moon. I don't know if it was Kennedy or some person went into NASA, and there was a janitor washing something, washing the ground. And they approached the janitor and asked, so, what do you think about what we are doing? What do you think about working here in NASA? And he said, I'm extremely proud. I'm helping put a man on the moon. And imagine that. He was a janitor. He was not an engineer. He was not an astronaut. But he felt responsible for putting a man on the moon. Imagine what purpose and what meaning this janitor was feeling because of this sense of responsibility he has, as opposed to a janitor that just said, well, I'm just washing the ground, there's nothing much more to it. And that's what I want to leave you with. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for the continued support. Feel free to click the like button, share, and leave a comment with your thoughts, and feel free to check out my next video, which will be coming in the future. Thank you so much. Bye.